Dear learners and viewers, a very warm welcome to this session. Today, we will be discussing the vulnerabilities in human trafficking. We have discussed that human trafficking is a crime against humanity. In human trafficking, somebody sells a person and somebody purchases a person. In human trafficking, we have seen that somebody is recruiting somebody, somebody is transporting somebody, somebody is moving from one place to another, and the means are fraud, deceit, coercion, undue influence, pressure, and the purpose is exploitation. So, today we will further discuss that what are the vulnerability, what makes a person vulnerable so that the trafficker uses his vulnerability and exploits him, thereby violating his human rights, his constitutional rights, his legal rights, and violating his dignity and worth, which is the essence of being a human being. If we talk about the definition of vulnerability, somebody who is able to physically, emotionally, or mentally hurt you, influence you, or attack you. So, this is the definition of vulnerability as per the Cambridge. Now, we have seen in human trafficking that somebody who is a trafficker will try to explore the vulnerabilities of the people and will try to lure them, to abduct them, to make them fool or give them a opportunity where they see a very pleasant life, or they just give you an option that you will not stay like this. Your lifestyle, your entire environment will change if you agree to the trafficker. The United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking aims to mobilize state and non-state actors to eradicate human trafficking by reducing both the vulnerability of potential victims and the demand for exploitation in all its form. So, in this, the mission statement, they have said that they will do something which will eradicate human trafficking. And how will you eradicate human trafficking? You would cut down the vulnerability of the person. You remove the conditions wherein a person becomes vulnerable. So, as a welfare state, it is the duty of the state to remove the difficulties and to remove the vulnerabilities. The second thing which they talk about is cutting down the demand for exploitation. So, as we have discussed that if you cut down a demand for something, the supply will always be affected. So, if you not demand cheap labor, if you don't have to demand beggary, if you do not demand organs, you do not demand domestic servitude, you do not demand pornographic sites, you do not demand people to be purchased and sold, then the supply will also cut down for all these offences and people will not be exploited. Ensuring adequate protection and support to those who fall victim. This is another point. Supporting the efficient prosecution of the criminals involved while respecting the fundamental human rights of all persons. A very important concept. When you talk in terms of protecting the fundamental rights of the person, then this is very important that you prosecute the people who have been involved in trafficking. They are accused of a crime, they are not customers. So, as we also discussed on this term, that are they customers or they are violators of law, and accuse people who should be prosecuted and convicted. So if I have a demand for sexual exploitation and I go to a massage parlor or to a gym or to any other brothel or any hotel, then I am not a customer because knowingly I am violating the other person's right. If there is a demand for pornography, and when somebody comes to my shop, I make a video, then I sell it, or I fabricate it, tamper it and post it on a pornographic site. So that means I am not a customer or a businessman, but I am a person who should be prosecuted by the law because I am violating that person's privacy rights and also his or her dignity rights. Demand for organs, I may be in need of an organ, but if I follow the malpractices of getting organs by paying people, by making use of their vulnerability, by involving a middleman to get a person who can be a donor, so that person is not getting the benefit of donation. Neither I am following the Organ Transplantation Act, neither I am thinking about his rights being violated or her rights being violated. So I am not a customer or a patient, I am a violator of law and should be handled strictly. I own a business or a factory. I need people to work in my factories. I need people who can work for my business. But if I am not willing to pay them well, I just want maximum gain, maximum output, and in terms of money, in terms of working condition, I exploit the labor laws and the Constitution of India. Then I am not a businessman, not a factory owner, but a violator of law and should be punished. Similarly, if I have lot of money to give people in loan, then I give people loans, and when they come back to me and they are not able to pay back my loan, then I start exploiting them. Or because they are not trained financially to calculate the principal and interest, so whatever they keep paying me, I just mishandle that and create false documents to show that the principal and the interest is always increasing. So for generations or for years, the person tries to pay off the loan but is unable to pay because of my malpractices. So I am using the ignorance, the vulnerability of the person to my profit. I am not a money lender, I am a violator who has violated the law and should be punished. I may be a person, who is working and he is or she is working for some firm or for some other people who provide people to work as domestic help, as nurses, as doctors, as carpenters, as laborers. So I am a service provider or a company registered or not registered to provide labor force in the country. So if I exploit the vulnerability of a person and send that person without following due process, without taking into consideration the law of the land, and then that person is abused, I am not only a worker in a firm or a company who deals with sending people or giving the people some people to work for, but I am a violator of law because I know that I have not done my registration, I have not maintained proper records of the people being recruited from my placement agency. I am not taking care of the welfare and the safety and security of the people who are working from my placement agency. Sometimes the placement agencies also keep the salaries of these people for years, and in the name of keeping the salary for safe, they exploit their vulnerability. So if I do not protect the law of the land, the labor laws, and I send people to work because of their vulnerability at places where they will be exploited, where their human rights will be violated, where their constitutional and legal rights will be violated, then I am not a service provider, I am a criminal. I am an accused. I am a person who should be convicted by law. So this is the difference between a customer and a service provider, or a genuine person, or a commoner. Now we will also discuss why does human trafficking happen. You know, human traffickers prey on people who are poor, isolated and weak. Issues such as disempowerment, social exclusion and economic vulnerabilities are the results of policies and practices that marginalize entire group of people and make them particularly vulnerable to being trafficked. Natural disasters, conflict and political turmoil weaken already tenuous social protection measures. Individuals and vulnerable to be trafficked not only because of conditions in their country of origin, however, the allure of opportunity, the relentless demand for inexpensive goods and services, and the expectation of reliable income driven people into potentially dangerous situation where they are at risk of being exploited. The Vienna Forum will examine, in this it examines the existing definition and practices related to prevention of trafficking, and it also focuses on the decreasing vulnerability and the strategic impact of existing prevention efforts. Now, we will discuss the vulnerability factors on the push and pull factor. So what are the pull factors and what are the push factors? Push factors means, factors which force you to leave. So factors which are forcing you to leave your village, factors which are forcing you to leave your place, factors which are forcing you to leave your home. And push factors are very important to understand because you also have these factors as factors which are very responsible for you being vulnerable, and pull factors are the factors which attract you. So I want to become an actor or actresses. So I have been seeing the advertisements and I have been lured by the promising advertiser. So he is pulling towards himself so that I leave my place and go there and work as actor or actresses. Somebody is showing me a very good life. So I am not getting food and basic amenities at my home, or I am living in a disturbed place where the family relations are not very pleasant, where the family members are beating and abusing each other. So somebody who is an outsider gives me a reason to smile. gives me a reason to believe that if I leave my home and go with him, then I will be able to realize my dreams, my aspirations, and will live a very good life. So these are the pull factors. So vulnerability factor can be lack of awareness. We are not aware about the Constitution of India, neither the Human Rights Conventions, Protection of Human Rights Act, and different legislations to deal with human trafficking. Then we are not aware about the programs and policies of the government. We are not aware of the fact that people or the representatives who are working for us should owe us a sense of accountability and responsibility because they have been chosen for our good. So lack of awareness creates vulnerability. I am not aware of the fact that whether I can use the technology. If yes, then how can I use the technology? Illiteracy is another important factor which is a cause of vulnerability. I am an illiterate person, so I don't know anything. Somebody tells me something, I believe that person. Somebody gives me an offer, I just trust that offer. Somebody promises me something, I just go for his words. I am illiterate. I cannot read or write or do any reasoned decisions. You know, we are talking about illiteracy rate in that the criteria is that if a person is able to read and write, then he is a literate person. But when we talk about ignorance of law is no excuse, then this concept does not work. When we talk about addressing the technological vulnerabilities, then this concept of illiteracy does not work. So the government can start with this concept, but we need quality education, we need information and awareness to develop and to grow in the society, in a society which talks about being in 5th generation of human rights. So illiteracy is something which has to be addressed in 1st and 2nd generation of human rights. Just remember the convention and the covenant on civil and political rights and economic, social and cultural rights and UDHR. So illiteracy has to be tackled in those dimensions. We are talking about Right to Education Act. We are talking about Article 21A, which talks about free and compulsory education to children below the age of 14 years of age. So we cannot talk of this yardstick as a developing concept because we have to address the issue of illiteracy. Then inequality is very important. Equality before law and equal protection of law, Article 14. No discrimination on the basis of caste, creed, gender, etc., Article 15. So inequalities have to be removed. I just told you that I get 24 hours electricity. Somebody is waiting for 3 hours of electricity in India and somebody is waiting for the bulb to glow. So we all are Indian citizens. My placing makes the difference. Who am I makes the difference. So this means there is inequality. Then somebody can afford drinking water as mineral bottles or water which has been purified. Somebody struggles kilometers to get a bucket of water. So inequality in terms of resources. Then somebody gets the latest technology for education, and somebody is struggling for a bench and a table. Somebody is struggling for a basic infrastructure at a college or a university level, or just to reach the school and college somebody has to struggle 40 or 200 kilometers from his or her house. So this is a vulnerability factor. Then we talk about in terms of medical health facilities. Somebody has access to all the private hospitals and the government hospitals where the infrastructure can be compared with the best in terms of infrastructure and facility, and somebody is waiting in a district hospital or in a village to get medical aid. Somebody cannot afford to get an ambulance and travel to the hospital. Somebody does not even get an ambulance in case of death. Somebody has to be kept on their backs or on the sticks or on the chairs to reach the road. So from the home they cannot travel by car, by scooter, by cycle, because there is no space. So inequalities and discrimination. Somebody cannot afford medical health, We have so many medical health programs by the central government and the state governments. So if those programs are not implemented, health facilities, insurance to all, because a poor person, a vulnerable person becomes more vulnerable if he suffers from some ailment, and getting a medical help is a costly business. So there are states who say that if you have the card, then in case of accident you don't have to worry about the bills. You can just reach the private hospital or the government hospital, whichever is nearby to the accident location, and get the treatment. So these are the factors which have to be addressed by the government in the positive way. Lack of quality education, which we just discussed. It is very important that this right should be there for all. Quality education for all, and there should be a plan of action of how much facility should be given at all level and what should be the charges at all level. Diversity should be addressed. This is also a factor. I have spoken about so many diversities. Unemployment has to be addressed. If I do not address unemployment today, then I do not provide skill-based education to the people. Somebody who has a PhD degree, if he is unemployed, then I have to look at the education program of the country, education policy of the country, and provide job opportunities in the villages, in the district programs and policies of the government of India and the state governments. We have very good policies, but just the need is to implement the policy at the grassroots level. And mindset is another vulnerability. I will never be able to come out of this situation. I deserve this abuse and violation and trauma. So you have to respect yourself. If you cannot respect yourself, your family members do not respect yourself, then your mindset never changes. There are so many people who think about gender stereotypes, about so much of respect and their ego, that it makes your family member vulnerable and you do not support because of the ego or the honor which is more important for you than your family members. Then natural calamity. In cases of disaster, we have seen that people become vulnerable. So the state government and the central government has to come up with immediate plans and programs to address the vulnerability, and if the programs are immediately implemented and people are rescued and people are rehabilitated, then they do not fall prey at the hands of the traffickers, otherwise they are vulnerable. Disasters can be man-made and natural. Both of the disasters have to be addressed by the welfare state in terms of programs and policies and implemented fully and monitored by an agency so that there are no gaps or lacunas, and while formulating such policies, the needs of the victims have to be taken into consideration. So you need to interact with the stakeholders and with the victims. Then lack of availability of basic facilities, which I just discussed, that you are not having the facilities and infrastructure is not the same at all levels. Then unrealistic dreams, which I just said, that you have so many dreams and then they are not practically to be realized. So the trafficker will make use of your unrealistic dreams and make you more vulnerable and suffer. Overtrust tendency. Somebody gives me a money, somebody becomes a god for me, I keep trusting that person. No. If somebody is doing undue favors, do not trust that person because that is an alarm. So you have to understand that nothing is free in this world and nobody will give you so much of time and money. Something is there in his mind. Reason choices are very important to understand. You cannot make a reasoned choice if you don't know your vulnerability, if you are not educated, if you are not properly trained. So lack of reasoned choices is also a vulnerability factor. Hunger, is a big vulnerability. Being deprived is a big vulnerability, and that needs to be addressed by the government because we have a welfare state concept. Servitude, where you think that somebody is under me and I can just do whatever I want to do. Lack of implementation of the PDS system, public distribution system. Your ignorance, gender discriminations, individual gains over community gains is a cause of vulnerability. Then you have no say, you have not been heard. This is also a reason for you being vulnerable. If I do not value my vote and vote on the basis of caste, creed, or my sentiments or my community statements, then that person will not work for me because I did not vote for work. So voting for work has to be there. Financial training needs to be there. Technological hazards have to be removed, and drugs and liquor should not be used by the people because they become vulnerable when they are drugged or they take liquors. There are a lot of social inequalities which makes you vulnerable. If you are surrendered or denounced by your family member, or you are a child in need of care and protection, this is your vulnerability. And lack of accountability and transparency issues, delayed justice, non-acceptance by family and society, dignity and worth issues, then non-implementation of the legal provisions, lack of involvement of stakeholders while making policy decisions for removing the vulnerabilities are the causes which makes you vulnerable. In the end, I would just like to tell you all that you have to talk about all these issues in your family. If you are able to create awareness about human trafficking, then you will be able to understand your vulnerability and remove your vulnerabilities so that you are not exploited and your human rights are not violated by the traffickers and by the violators of law. Thank you for this session. Have a safe time.